Welcome into Rounding the Bases.
Round the bases. Everybody knows Joe Goldberg. It's around the bases. Everybody knows Joe Goldberg.
Hey everybody, welcome into another episode of Rounding the Bases presented by Community America Credit Union, invested in you. A shout out to my friends at Chief of Staff Kansas City, whether you're in KC, on the East Coast like my guest, or anywhere around the US for that matter. If you're looking for a job, looking for a resource, looking to hire someone, check them out. They believe in people, they believe in culture. That's why I partner with them. chiefofstaffkc.com, making connections that matter. Got a great baseball connection today as we're into baseball season, and on Rounding the Bases, I'm joined by a guest who spent 30 years living his childhood dream, leaning into all of its many lessons. Ken Davidoff is a retired New York Post journalist where he built a career covering Major League Baseball in one of the nation's toughest markets. But at the age of 50, he made a bold call, stepping away from the grind of daily sports writing and into a new chapter. Today, he's the co-author of 101 Lessons from the Dugout. It's his new book that explores what baseball can teach us all about failure, resilience, and most importantly, the game of life. I'm so excited right now to be joined by Ken. And Ken, it's so good to see you. And congratulations on the book and everything that's going on. Life after, you're not retired, I know that, but life after baseball, so to speak. How are things going? Because it's been a few years now in this new world, this new life that you're living.
Joel, it's going great. It's great to be here with you. And life off the hamster wheel is pretty damn good.
The hamster wheel was a lot of years, and I want to talk about your book for quite a bit on the show, but also just the changing world, media, baseball. You've seen it all in your career, and then it all came to an end by design, right? I mean, you called your shot, which a lot of people in your industry, my industry, we could lump them all together if we want. Most people don't get to make that call. Take me back to that, how difficult it was, because you had a very long and successful career. And I don't know how easy it is to walk away from writing about baseball every day for the New York Post.
Yeah, Joel. So I started covering baseball full-time in like 1997. And this was my childhood dream. I grew up in New Jersey. Every morning I would read a newspaper called the New York Star-Ledger. I'd read the Yankees and Mets coverage, and there were two writers. The Yankees writer was Moss Klein, and the Mets writer was Dan Castellano. And I said, these guys, this is what I want to do when I grow up. And I was blessed enough to achieve that goal. I was able to cover the Yankees as a beat writer, and then I graduated to what we call baseball columnist. I wrote for the Bergen Record, for Newsday on Long Island, and finally the New York Post. And I just reached a point, I would say about 20 years in, where I just felt like the job was getting harder and harder, and my stress level was getting higher and higher. And I started having conversations with my family, my wife, Sarah, and our son, JJ. And my son, JJ, had only known me as the dad who's always headed to the airport or coming home from the airport. And they said, to me, like, you don't seem happy. Like, you're not that happy a person. And they said, like, my wife said, if you're not enjoying the job, then stop doing it. Because, we don't enjoy not having you around so much, 150 plus nights of travel a year. So it was a years long discussion with my wife and running some numbers and all that. But in February of 2022, my contract at the New York Post ended, and I notified my sports editor, Chris Shaw, like, I'm leaving. I'm not going to The Athletic. I'm not going to ESPN. I'm just leaving the business altogether. So it's been over 4 years now, and honestly, I have zero regrets.
It makes me so happy to hear that, because I think that there's something in this industry, and I don't know. I don't know when I'll be done. My head, I keep thinking I'll be done when they tell me I'm done, but maybe I'll have that moment where I say, our worlds are different from this standpoint, that I think for those of us on TV and those of us that don't, there's some of my TV brethren that just moved straight from baseball to, national games on ESPN, college basketball, and their grind is maybe more like yours. I've got my off season to go speak and determine my schedule and do all those things, which gives me sort of the best of both worlds. But I think what people don't know about baseball writers is that the job is all year long. I mean, you might finish the 150 game grind and all those days on the road. You're still breaking stories all off season too. I'm curious what it was. I mean, thank goodness you had the support of your family, the encouragement to know that whatever you did was going to be right for them. But when you've spent your whole life dreaming of getting to this point, and I'm sure that you have pinch me moments, as normal as it has become for guys like you and I to do what we do, at least for me, like I still want to pinch myself at some point every day and say, holy crap, I get to do this. There's also the other side that feels strength in the normalcy of it, that this is where I belong, this is what I do, and I don't ever want to be in awe of too much. But like, this is what you dreamed of growing up. Those dreams, by the way, are supposed to change. They're allowed to change. But when everyone thinks that you already have the greatest job in the world, how could you possibly leave it? When everyone in the world would want to trade places with you, even if they don't know what the grind is, because heck, I love baseball. I'm just curious how you wrestled with all of that and ultimately made the decision that was the right decision.
Yeah, I did wrestle with it, Joel, but it was, as I said, years-long process. So I really weighed all the pros and the cons. The bottom line for me is I had stopped pinching myself. There was never a day anymore where I was like, oh, wow, this is my dream job. I'm getting to do this. I felt like mission accomplished, dream met. Like, who says I have to keep fulfilling my dream until I'm 65 or 70? Maybe I'm meant to just move on at 50, 51 and try something different. And honestly, Joel, the biggest concern I had was like, how will my ego handle it? Because look, I'm sure you get recognized more than I do because you're on TV. But I did a fair amount of TV in New York and nationally. The occasional person on the street and in a restaurant and on the New York City subway. And, I like that. That was a boost for the ego. Just the idea of having that nypost.com email address like that had power behind it. Right. So giving up that email address. So it was things like that I wrestled with. And I decided well, can I maintain these relationships I've formed if I'm no longer have this job? If I reach out to someone, will they not return my text message or my phone call or my email? And thankfully, I would say almost 100% they have.
And that's a testament to you, by the way. I mean, I think we all would like to hope. Look, most of us, not all, but most of us are in the business, not because we think it's cool to meet this person or that person, but you do build these relationships along the way. And then hopefully, and I think it sounds like what you've seen is that people are people. They're, you're going to connect with them and stay connected with them if it's important. And so I guess that's been the nice thing for you is that you can maintain those relationships without the deadlines and the chaos and the stress and everything that came from the intense pressure of writing every single day. I'm guessing that life on the other side is as good, if not better than you expected.
Absolutely, Joe. Yeah, I mean, I'm busy enough. We mentioned the book, and we'll talk about the book. I'm an adjunct professor at a college, Endicott College in Massachusetts. I love that. I love paying it forward. I love leveraging my accomplishments and contacts to be hopefully a successful professor for these young people. And it's really, Joel, you know what it is? Like people are fascinated with our jobs, right? So they want, for me, it wasn't even the travel as much as the hours. Just the insane hour. And I often use Kansas City as an example just because of the geography of it. Like, let's say last night of a series, extra innings, and you get out the door at Kauffman Stadium at midnight. I'm not checking into the Kansas City Airport Marriott until almost 1. Yep. And then I've got the 5 a.m. wake up call for my flight from Kansas City to Dallas. Like that takes years off your life,
Yeah. I mean, I've said this many times before, like writers, at least the ones that are there every day. And that's not a slight to the ones that aren't. Not everybody is coming from places with budgets to do this. That's a whole other story. Most of these places don't have budgets anymore. So we could always talk about that or not. But, writers to me are like coaches. They're the first there. They're the last to leave. I think broadcasters are a little bit more like the players. We're putting in our work. We're doing everything. Off season's the same. Our television crew, by the way, the guys in the truck are more like you. They are there and doing stuff behind the scenes that nobody sees. There's a wear and tear to all of this. I mean, I get to finish up on a getaway day and hop on a team charter. You know, like I don't have to file then my story or my column for the next day. And then, you know, I look at, say, our beat writer, Annie Rogers with MLB, and it's like, okay, well, not going to get out on this flight. So got to get up at 5 a.m. to get on this flight to get to the next city. And I'm already, you know, like waking up in bed in whatever that city is. And so you get to lose all of that. I'm curious, before we talk about the book, did your love of the game, your love of baseball, did it change when you retired? Were you able to enjoy it more? Were you not able to enjoy it for a while? Because I know this much, even in my role, also in my role, it's just a different perspective. It's not that I love baseball less. It's just I love it in a different way because I can't enjoy it like a fan anymore. I'm too wired to be thinking about storylines and all that type of stuff. Did that change for you when you hung it up in terms of writing, or no?
It changed 100%, Joel. I had reached a point, and I always went in with a certain old school mentality. Like when people would say, "You must really love baseball," and I would say, "Well, I love journalism, you know, and I love writing and covering baseball." You know, I say, in one sense, I can't love baseball because my mission is to call out wrongdoings by baseball teams and players and the league itself. So you kind of have to, if you have a love for it, you kind of have to push it aside, which is what you're saying too. And now that I did take like that. I stepped down on March 1st, 2022. I don't think I watched the game until the playoffs that year. I just needed to decompress. But now, like, as I said, I go to these games, mostly playoff games, and I'll go to 2 or 3 games a year with my son or my wife or a friend, and just to sit back and enjoy the game. And so I am kind of back to loving it as I once did way back when.
So you thought about this for a year of hanging it up. What was the plan? Was the plan, I'm going to go now and write a book, or did that come afterwards? And then becoming an adjunct professor. I mean, you got a lot going on, so I'm not surprised by that. And how exciting, by the way, at into your 50s to, or maybe it was even before you got to 50, I don't know, but to say, hey, there's a whole nother side of life here, not just with the family, that's obvious, but suddenly you're getting to do things that you never did before, becoming an adjunct professor, writing this book, and having the time to write this book while not being on the deadlines of producing a column and all of those type of things. Did you know right away you were going to go the book route, or how did that come about?
So I had met my current literary agent. Her name is Lisa Leschny during COVID. I actually signed up with her during COVID, met her before COVID. And Lisa paired me up with my co-author for this book, Harley Rothbart, who is an accomplished parenting expert and a retired pediatrician who just happens to love baseball and softball. So before I even told Lisa, it was really like a family secret. I knew I was stepping down, but Lisa introduced me to Harley. And Harley, this book is his baby, which we'll get into. But so like in January of 2022, Harley invited me to be his co-author on this book. The idea being like I would look at what he had written, which was considerable, and then kind of infuse the book with my perspectives on baseball, softball, and use my connections to help us with the forward. We got the legendary New York Met David Wright to write the forward and help us with the endorsements, blurbs, and all that. So this was a possibility when I stepped down, but far from a certainty. And then a good story about relationships is how I got the adjunct professor job. So I became friends with a gentleman named Steve DeSalvo. He was the original director of Joe Torre's Safe at Home Foundation, which launched back in like 2002. Steve was the money raiser. He ran the development behind the scenes. And Steve and I became friendly back then. We always stayed in touch. Steve leveraged his fundraising skills to become a college president. So we stayed in touch all those years. He became president of Endicott College. So on I think it was February 8th, 2022, I put on Twitter, like, I'm out. I'm leaving this industry. Anyone out there have any ideas? Let me know. And on February 11th, Steve emailed me. He said, my son saw your tweet. Do you have any interest in becoming a professor at Endicott College? So that's the value of maintaining your relationships, right? And lo and behold, I went up to visit Endicott, met some people, and by January of 2023, I was teaching a class up there.
Unbelievable. And now that's just a major part of your life, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I love it.
I mean, you're just the little I've talked to you about this leading up to here and today, like this is energizing you. I'm guessing. I mean, this is like a whole new chapter.
Yeah, I'm so much happier. I remember I saw a friend. I was that first summer I was off, like 2022, and I saw a buddy. He said, "You've lost some weight." He said, "Are you on Ozempic?" And I said, "No, I'm not on Ozempic. I'm no longer in the Yankee Stadium press box.
I'm off of baseball
at midnight, pounding Coke so I can finish my column." I said, "You try that diet." You know, so yeah, it has been fully energizing is a word I've been using.
So again,
good. Proud to have served the time I did on the baseball beat, and very blessed. But yeah, I just felt like let someone else have their shot now.
All right. Well, we'll get back to your career and some journalism stuff towards the end, but I want to talk about the book. And, you know, I was thinking about this too, just with the title. And for me, I've always believed, all right, 101 lessons. Baseball to me is so good with lessons. I'll say this to audiences a lot. I believe baseball. And by the way, like to what you were talking about before too, I grew up loving baseball too, but people will say to me like, "Oh, did you always want to be in baseball?" I said, "No, I wanted to be on TV and sports." Well, what was your favorite sport? I don't know, baseball, hockey. I loved basketball, football too, but I think my favorite sport would have been whichever one I was covering.
Right.
Because when I was covering football, that was my favorite. When I was covering hockey, that was my favorite. But there is something very unique about baseball because no other sport is 5 to 7 days a week. And if it weren't for union rules, it might be 25 or 30 straight days, right? But you still, you come home from a road trip and it's like, all right, I'm home. Still got 10 more days to go, right? It could be 16, 17, 18 in a row. So the title of your book, it made me thinking about an old Buck O'Neill line. And I queued it up. I've heard different versions of it, but it really applies. He said, "Nothing better than baseball for kids teaches them all the lessons, how to be a teammate, how to be a man. Nobody does it for you. You got to stand up." I always use the line Buck O'Neill. And I've got some Buck O'Neill stuff and Monarchs over my shoulder and Satchel Paige over another shoulder. You know, we got the history of the Negro Leagues here right in Kansas City. Buck O'Neill would say something along the lines I tell audiences of "Nothing better than baseball. It teaches all the lessons." You've now written about that and with the perspective from a pediatrician as well. Tell me about the book.
Yeah, so as I said, Harley Ropart is not someone I knew until we paired together for this book, and we still have never met in person, Joel. We've just Zoomed a bunch.
No
of
way!
times,
wow.
Spoken on the phone. He lives in Denver, so he's closer to you than to me.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And he just brought talk about love of the game. I mean, Harley loves baseball, softball, and he came up with the actual 101 lessons. Like he presented me with this manuscript, and I said, "Harley, I have a lot of thoughts, on things we can tweak, but the actual 101 lessons, let's keep them. I think these are great." And just the way he breaks it down into all these different scenarios, and basically what we do, each chapter is 1 or 2 pages, and from each chapter we extrapolate a life lesson and give you some examples. So like we start off chapter 1, keeping score. That's like an amuse-bouche at a restaurant, just like a palate cleanser. But then chapter 2 is the starting lineup. Prove you're ready, earn your spot, believe in yourself. And that's, what do you do when you get to the field and you're not in the starting lineup? How do you respond to that? Do you put your head down and let it ruin your day, or chin up and say, all right, look, I'm going to be the best pinch hitter, pinch runner, defensive replacement I can be, and maybe I can win more playing time the next game. Same way going back to school. If you try for the school play, you don't get the lead role, but you get the role with 2 lines. How are you going to react to that? Obviously, what you should ideally do is, I'm going to crush these 2 lines, and when it comes time for the next production, I'm going to get a better role. Student council. So there's so many different ways these can translate. And then we have 6 parts to the book: in the dugout, at the plate, on base, in the field, on the mound, extra innings. And we just break down every element of these games and then how they can carry over to the rest of your life.
Again, so many lessons. And I love, just the first theme there. Identity is bigger than the scorebook. I always like to say, and the one I use all the time is small ball. That small ball, to me, I tell audiences, they're the little things that don't always show up in the scorebook, right? And that's that identity you're talking about too, is bigger than the scorebook. There is no better sport to keep track of every little detail than baseball. There's no other sport that keeps a scorebook, right? I mean, yes, there are whatever you do for the other sports, but like there's something about a scorecard in baseball to me that is so powerful. And by the way, we all have a different scorecard. We all do it differently as well. With a lot of pride and criticism and judgment and all of that. I mean, I don't want anybody to see my scorecard. It's an ugly mess, but it works for me. But a lot of the reason, Ken, why it works for me is that I actually put things on there that don't show up in most scorecards, because then they show up in my post-game show. Mm-hmm. It's about oftentimes those, and I want you to talk about this because you spend a career covering some of the biggest name athletes yet. And so I think apropos for your book, some of the ones that you remember, I know the most, are names that most people would never remember or couldn't tell you their significance, yet they stuck with you. And I'm curious your thoughts on that, because to me, that becomes relatable to the kid in the school play that's in the back of the choir or the ensemble or coming off the bench in soccer or whatever it might be. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, Joel. And I think that's what I brought to this book, because Harley brought his experiences coaching his kids and his grandkids and just dealing with young people and their parents, and some of the parents were their coaches. And I brought the idea of like, all right, I've seen these lessons played out at the highest level. And this one that really stands out for me is chapter 57, Errors, Grow from Your Mistakes, Stay in the Moment. And a story I've been telling on my little book tour here. Now, this play was huge in New York. I'm curious if this registers for you at all. 2009 regular season Subway Series, Yankees Mets, Friday night at Yankee Stadium. So Mets are up by 1, 2 outs, bottom of the ninth. The Yankees have 2 men on. K-Rod, Francisco Rodriguez, is pitching. A-Rod, Alex Rodriguez, is hitting. A-Rod hits a towering pop fly in the infield. Game over. Mets win. Except Luis Castillo, who had his moments as a player, was an all-star with the Marlins. Mm-hmm. He's the Mets second baseman. One-hands it off his glove to the ground, and the Yankees, the guys on the bases are running, 2 outs. The Yankees win the game instantaneously. One of the most shocking endings to a game I have ever seen. And it's Subway Series, A-Rod, huge story. And, I mean, it's still, in New York, it is a legendary moment. And for Mets fans, a hair-tearing moment. So Castillo talked to the media that night. He owned his mistake and all that. But I remember it was a Saturday day game the next day, quick turnaround. And I just planted myself in the visiting clubhouse at Yankee Stadium, the Mets clubhouse. I said, I want to see what Luis Castillo looks like when he walks in today. And bless Luis Castillo, he walked in with a smile, joking with everyone. The Mets PR people checked with him, hey, you don't have to talk again if you don't want to the media. Castillo said, no, I'll talk. And he talked. Yeah, how was your night? Typical follow-up story. Wasn't great, but we got to move on. And that day he had a terrific game, and he helped the Mets beat the Yankees. So talk about, growing stronger from your mistakes and just keeping your head up and staying tough and staying in the moment. That was, I think, Luis Castillo personified that about as well as I've ever seen anyone do.
And you don't forget players like that, right? I mean, you may not remember a lot of the plays and a lot of the stats, or maybe you do. Maybe you're one of those guys. I'm lucky if I remember what happened yesterday, but I remember the good guys and the bad guys, if that makes sense. I remember the guys that were going to do it no matter what on the worst of days. I remember guys that didn't want to do it on the worst of days. And it usually added up, right? I mean, I still say that a baseball clubhouse is not all that different than an office, a diverse office with people from different backgrounds and different hierarchies and the different, the different groups, the cliques.
Sure.
It's inevitable, right? Yeah. I mean, I think that a dugout and a clubhouse, more lessons to be learned as well, pretty much every day if you're paying attention.
Absolutely, yeah. And you see who runs with who when there's a natural pitchers hitters divide, but some guys on both sides are able to cross that bridge and make friends on the other side. But yeah, there's no doubt you do. Anthropologically, baseball clubhouses are fascinating.
Yeah, I mean the best I covered in my now 18 years with the Royals was Eric Hosmer, who just had this ability to connect with the Latin guys. His mom is of Cuban descent. To his best friend on the team was African American. You could see him hanging out at night with a coach or a pitcher or fellow hitters. He's now joining our broadcast team as a rookie this year, and so it's been fun to come full circle. But you learn those lessons from guys like that. He is someone that respected the role players and understood that as well. What else? Let's talk. I mean, there's so many themes from the book, and all of them I think are important. I want to talk a little bit about the failure piece of baseball, because there's no other sport that fails as much as baseball. I mean, you cannot be successful in any other phase of life if you're failing 70% of the time. But at least what I say to people is that if you can manage failure like the best baseball players, if you can manage failure like Derek Jeter did, like Salvador Perez does, like the best of them do, they turn the page immediately too. I'm curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say a lot of our chapters deal with failure in different measures, including like I talked about errors on the field, and we certainly address the idea that even the best hitters only reach base, in the new school metrics, 4 out of 10 times, counting walks and hit by pitches and so on, but you'll get hits 3 out of 10 times. And again, just how are you going to deal with that failure? Who can you turn to in times of failure? We have a lot of talk about that. We even have, a chapter on the mound meeting. If you're a pitcher, sometimes that mound meeting can really help you settle down and collect your thoughts. And, you can have a mound meeting in any walk of life, mound meeting with your teacher, with your mom or dad or your older sibling. So just we deal a lot. Obviously, baseball and softball teach you a lot about how to deal with failure, because there is so much failure in these games.
You've got a great theme in here too about decision making under pressure, and that can mean so many things, right? For baseball or softball, waiting for the right pitch, knowing when to swing and when not to, changing your approach with 2 strikes, which I think is a great lesson of how you might go about your life, right? Not every situation is the same. Talk about that a little bit more too, because that's, again, that would fall under my category of small ball, but there's some really deep lessons here. And the modern day player, they're wired differently than the guys we saw coming in. They've all been schooled on, most of them have been schooled on meditation and breathing and all these things that, the older generations, just see ball, hit ball. If you watch Bobby Witt Jr., who is, one of the top players in the world, before every pitch, when he steps into the batter's box, steps out, steps back in, deep breath, a reset. He has worked on this. Let's talk about that a little bit, because these guys are wired to run through a wall, yet judgment is a huge piece to this, and not all of them figure it out right away, if ever.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And it's funny, one of our chapter 23 is actually small ball. So just the idea of, doing things one step at a time. But we have a lot about decision making. We have chapter 33 leading off, balancing risk and reward. How much of a lead do you take off first base? What is the risk there, but what is the reward of doing that? And obviously there's so many risk reward calculations that you take in your life. Then there's a chapter on stealing, on tagging up, chapter 38. And this was Harley's perspective. That was really interesting. For a younger player who's just learning the game, maybe it takes a moment to realize, okay, I need to fly ball to the outfield. Your first instinct as a very young player is just to run. But no, I need to tag up, see how this plays out. And then I can, if they catch it, I can go ahead and advance a base. And just how many times in life, and I know as a 55-year-old now, there's still times when my first instinct is to just be aggressive in reacting to something, as opposed to taking that moment to tag up, collect your thoughts, and then react. So I thought that was an interesting one.
It's a great way to put it too, for a young person coming up, not just for the baseball field or the softball diamond, but in life. As you just said that, the tag, I never thought about it in terms of tagging up, but that impulse that we all have to immediately fire that text back or that email back.
Yes.
Right? I mean, that's it. Like it just clicked on me like, wait a minute, let's tag up here and take a breath.
Yeah.
and we might actually send something that's a little bit more decent than our emotional reaction. There's something really powerful there about tagging up. I'm just realizing that right now.
Yeah, and I have to give full credit to Harley for that one. I never viewed tagging up through that prism, but what a great way of looking at it.
What are some of your other favorite lessons on this? Because I think that we all get so enamored in baseball with the home run. Yet I very rarely, maybe nowadays in the day of launch angle, but I very rarely have interviewed a player after the game when they hit a big home where they didn't say some version of, I wasn't trying to hit a home run.
Right.
You know, we're so enamored with the home run. And let's be honest, it's a lot easier to write about and talk about than the walk-off balk or the walk-off wild pitch. I've had a couple of those, by the way, and that becomes, well, who do I interview for this? Because I don't really know who the star of the game was. But anyway, go on.
Yeah, so we do have chapter 25, home runs, gratitude, overcoming hard times. And just, obviously I get everything you're saying about homers and launch angle. But the idea, and especially at the Little League level, when you hit a home run, it's special, right? So as you're rounding those bases, hit a ball over the fence as opposed to an inside the park job. As you're rounding those bases, like take a moment to just feel happy and to feel gratitude for everyone who helped you get to that moment. The person who threw you all that batting practice, who taught you your swing, and your teammates who cheered you on. So take that moment for the home run, because it's a rare time in baseball, softball, where you have a few seconds there, but you don't have to focus that much on rounding the bases. It's your podcast after all. So take that moment. And then, we just have another chapter that I really like is chapter 53, Fielder's Choice, because it's about prioritizing. So Joel, I'll put you on the spot. All right, you're the team in the field. You're on defense. You have a 4-run lead, and it's first and second, no outs. So what is your philosophy there in the field? Up four,
first and second,
no outs.
No outs. Are we at double play depth, or are we not at double play depth? I know
you're at either way.
All right, well, I'll put it this way. Yeah. I'm not worried about the runner going to third. I'm probably going to try to get the runner at second base. That's what I'm going to do. If I can get a double play out of it, great. But most importantly, I just want to get an out.
Yeah, exactly. So now let's change that. In the field, no outs. They have first and second, but you're only up by 1 run. So how does that change your philosophy?
Yeah, my first question was going to be, how much are we up by at this point? And that's obviously going to dictate it. No outs is going to dictate it as well. We don't want to get that rally going. I'm going to try to get the runner at third base if I can. If I can't get him at third, I'm not going to force it. Then I'm going to make sure I at least get the sure out at second. But if I can get the double play, I'm going to get. So you got to make a decision there, right? Depends on what. Ken, I would say it depends on what point of the game we're at. If we're early, I'm willing to concede that run and go for the double play. If it's the 8th or 9th inning, I'm going to get that runner out of third.
Yeah, I would say, and at the Little League level where double plays are rare, I think focus would probably be get the out
third
of
base.
Right? Yeah,
third base. Yeah.
So now let's carry that over to these young people's lives. So let's say chemistry is your hardest class, but you're acing it. You got an A, and tonight you have homework in 5 subjects. So tonight, just get the out, just do your homework across the board, just get your chemistry done, but don't worry about it too much. You got English and math and history and so on and so forth. But now let's say you have a C in chemistry. Now you're only up by a run. You need to get that out at third base. You need to step on the gas and ace your chemistry. So the idea of prioritizing based on the context of what you're dealing with.
Mm-hmm. Powerful lessons. They're so good. All right, one final question before I get to my baseball themed questions. Do you have, and maybe you just hit it right there, do you have a favorite lesson or something? I mean, I know JJ's older now, but if you had a younger kid that you'd say, I want my, well, shoot, I mean, JJ could still get these lessons too, I believe, as he's getting ready to graduate from college. But regardless, do you have a favorite lesson that is a must-have for any kid?
Well, I'll pick a simple one, Joel, and I have an agenda here because this one has gotten a little attention. So I'll pick chapter 92, dragging the field, cleaning the dugout, clean up your messes, take pride in your spaces. So it's quite simply, when the game ends, make sure the field is clean. You'll rake the field if you have to, and clean your space, clean your dugout. And that applies to 22-year-old JJ. It applies to 55-year-old Ken, to my 78-year-old mom. But what's great about this one in particular, so, the book writing process, I apologize for this phone.
We'll be all right.
Yeah. So we had this book done last fall, came out in February. And so then the World Series happens. Game 2, Yoshinobu Yamamoto pitches a complete game, beats the Blue Jays at the Rogers Center. And before he goes into the clubhouse to do his thing and speak to the media, he cleans the dugout. He cleans the visiting dugout
Yep, I remember that.
Toronto. And it went a little viral. And what a great moment. And we were joking, like, how did Yamamoto get an advanced copy of our book? You know, it's not even out yet. So we were just so thrilled to see that. So we really enjoyed that correlation. But yeah, like it's always, you're never too old to clean up after yourself.
By the way, almost no one in any major league dugout has received that lesson. So I would just tell the kids that are reading at home, don't look at a picture of what a dugout looks like after the game. I made a mistake of, putting a fun video on TikTok a couple of years ago about, I was doing like these little dugout tours, and it was after the game. And the amount of people that were so pissed off at all the sunflower seeds and cups on the floor, like, well, did anybody teach these kids how to clean up after themselves? There's something about baseball. They just throw all that crap on the ground. So kudos to Yamamoto and maybe the Japanese culture of doing exactly what that lesson is. And yes, you should all be cleaning your rooms and cleaning up after yourself. It'll make life a lot better. Let me get to the baseball theme questions. The first one I always like to ask people is, what's the biggest home run you've hit? I'll when I have a big leaguer or a former big leaguer on, which I don't do a lot of, but I'm thinking of guys I've had on the show, Hosmer, Alex Gordon, Kevin Youkilis. I give them the right to answer it as biggest home run professionally in business or on the field. So I'll do the same to you. It could be professional home run or not personal, professional home run, or it could also be the greatest home run that you've ever covered or watched, whatever you want to go.
Wow. I'm going to go personal, personal without me, but professional.
Yep.
Getting the job at the New York Post was so meaningful for me. That was in 2012. And I worked at Newsday prior to that, Newsday Long Island, great newspaper, great experience. But the Post is just so, legendary for its reputation. And so just doing that, put me in a position ego-wise to feel like, okay, there's nothing else I want to accomplish with this job. And it was such a great 10-year run working with a great boss and Chris Shaw, my sports editor, and then great teammates, Joel Sherman, who I'm sure you know, and the Mets beat writer, Mike Puma, and the Yankees beat writers, George King and Dan Martin, and so many other people, Mike Vaccaro and Mark Hale. So just being part of this team that was just all we wanted to do was just kick butt every day.
Yeah.
Like we were so all in. We all worked so hard and we worked collaboratively. So it was just such a rewarding experience. And again, I mentioned at the start of the interview, the ego, like my fame level rose at the New York Post because everyone reads the New York Post.
It's the Post,
It. So that made me feel like mission accomplished, getting that job at the Post.
Yeah. Did you have a most just for curiosity's sake, a most memorable home run that you covered?
Wow. You know what, Joel? I would have to say 2001 World Series, Game 5, Scott Brocious, game-tying two-run homer, bottom of the ninth off Kim with the Diamondbacks, because that, having lived, I was living in New Jersey at the time, but knowing people who died in 9/11 and knowing what that run. First, the Mets had their little regular season run with Mike Piazza's famous home run, but they didn't quite make it to the playoffs. And the Yankees kind of took the baton and had this magical playoff run. So games 4 and 5 of the World Series, down to their last out, consecutive 2-run home runs, Tino Martinez and then Brocious. So I remember when Brocious hit that home run, I stood up out of shock, and I was not alone. And I got teary-eyed because not because I wanted the Yankees to win so badly, because I didn't, but just thinking about the people in those stands who were just finding such relief and joy during a time of such grief and agony in our country. And again, knowing people who had died and families who were impacted, I got verklempt.
Yeah. And that is the true definition of the word right there. Mine doesn't have quite the same emotional level. I just know that in 2005, traveling with the St. Louis Cardinals, and I'm in the press box at Minute Maid. Remember, it was a little bit lower. It used to be lower. And I'm standing at the stairwell to make a beeline down to get to the clubhouse. and I'm just going to wait to watch Albert Pujols bat. And you can't hear yourself think it's so loud in that building. The roof is closed, and Pujols homers off of Brad Lidge to, at least at the moment, potentially end, or at least it ended up just slowing down the Astros' bid to get to their first ever World Series. And I've never heard a moment that was so loud where somebody hit the mute button and it went from off the charts to you could hear a pin drop, other than Cardinals players yelling and screaming. You just don't forget those feelings.
I was there too. I was there.
You were there.
Yeah.
Am I describing it right? I mean, it was like
100%. It was amazing.
I'd never heard something go from so loud to so quiet. And so those are fun moments. And then you go work. Anyway, second question as we round the bases, biggest swing and miss along the way for you, and what did you learn from it?
Yeah, so this is so in 2004, I received an email from the Washington Post. I was with Newsday. Washington Post emailed me. Obviously, they've been through some turmoil this last month, but they emailed me the Montreal Expos were moving to Washington, become the Washington Nationals. They were going to add to their baseball coverage, and would I like to interview about it, possibly joining them? I said, absolutely. What a thrilling opportunity. So I went down there to interview, and I was a good candidate, Joel. Like, I knew my stuff. I knew the industry. I knew journalism. I just felt like I deserved to be in that interview room. I had earned that opportunity. And I met the executive editor of the Post. His name was Len Downey, pretty legendary guy. And he said to me, "What are your goals?" And just the way that I'm wired, it's just not how I view the world. So I said, well, I don't really look at it that way. Mr. Downey, I think I would do a great opportunity. I think I would do a great job for you here if you gave me the opportunity. And, if I work hard enough on this position, I'm sure that would open some doors. I'm not really worried about that. And this was it was a 2-day stay. They paid for me to come down from New York. They put me up in a hotel. And that night I went to dinner with the sports editor of the Post, Emilio Garcia Ruiz. And we're having dinner. Emilio said, well, they're really into goals here. That's what they care about. They want to know what your ambition is. I said, oh, well, when they asked me what my goals were, I said, I didn't really look at the world that way. And Emilio did one of these, hand to the head, and lo and behold, a few weeks later, Emilio calls me. He said, I'm sorry. I had to offer the job to someone else. That answer to Len Downey just killed you. So my lesson, Joel, was learn how to BS. Learn, realize when people ask you something, think about what they want to hear in your response, and then craft your response accordingly.
Yeah, and I would even say, as someone that always appreciates some good BSing, that, there's something more even beyond that. That is a skill, by the way, that I believe in. But when it's necessary is if you listen and pay attention. This can be true in sales, prospects. They'll tell you what they're looking for.
Yeah.
And the reality of it is you could have come up with plenty of goals and it wouldn't have even tested your BS ability that much. Right. Okay, how about small ball for you? What is small ball to you, Ken?
Yeah, small ball. So, Joel, that, as I mentioned, that is an actual chapter in our book, chapter 23. And I think that was the key to my success professionally, because when I started, I covered my first Major League Baseball game in 1995. My strategy was to play small ball. I wasn't looking to break huge news, and I wasn't in the position to write columns at that point, but I certainly wouldn't have wanted to anyway. My job was, I thought, was to just get one hit at a time, move runners over, metaphorically speaking, which meant introduce myself to as many people as possible, try to start getting some exclusive interviews, even if they weren't headline news, just insightful quotes from players and coaches and managers and executives. And then, okay, you graduate to a point where, back in the day, like a Yankees notebook with 5 different items. Maybe if my third item is something that no one else has, oh, look at that third note that Davidoff had. Good job by him. And then, so I moved my way up to where I was in a position to swing for the fences with heavy commentary, hard-hitting commentary, and breaking news stories. That was my small ball, moving up in that way.
Love that. And it's certainly something I've subscribed to forever as well, and somehow still here. So the small ball does work. I want to wrap it up with 4 final questions. The first one, I'll go heavy hitting on this one. Not that you can't handle that. The world of journalism right now, is a mess. I believe it. I think the first signs that I go back to a time when I worked in St. Louis before I even was with the regional sports network, and I was with the local Fox, and the St. Louis Post-Dispatch would not, and they've got that great baseball coverage, but just we'll talk sports. I was in the sports department. They would not release any stories to their website until the 10 o'clock news was over. Right? It was always an AP story because there was worry that, TV was going to steal their stuff. It's actually gone the reverse now. A lot of times you see it flipping around, and now writers are quoting what's on TV. They don't have the staff. They're not as sourced. But more than anything, it's because the immediacy. If you are not now, you miss your deadline. The deadline is instantaneous, which leads to more mistakes. Mistakes that are made now used to get us fired in the past. Now, you don't even need to apologize. You just move on to the next one. Who's the media? Who's a blogger? I remember when writers started to have to do blogs, and oftentimes what they wrote in the paper had a different tone than what they wrote in the blog. Which do you believe? And now social media is media. When I look and I see the Washington Post killing their sports department, one of the best in the country, when I look at one of the better places, I think, to go as a sports writer is The Athletic, something that didn't exist before. What's going on in the world of journalism? Because at least for an old school guy like me, it's really discouraging.
Well, Joel, everything you just said, I could have hit record on my end, and the next time someone asked me, why did you leave journalism, I would have just played your answer. There was just, and again, I fully get it. Of course, the consumer should have their information immediately. But that made my job so much harder. Back when I would cover Joe Torre in 1996, if he said something at 4 o'clock, I would have hours to process it, to reach out to additional sources, to really think about, okay, what are the nuances to this? And now when, Aaron Boone of course, I'm blanking out on the Royals manager. He's the
Matt Quatraro. Matt Quatraro, yep.
Tampa Bay Rays coach formerly. When Matt says something at 4 o'clock, of course it should be published by 4:01. Yeah, the consumers demand and deserve that. But that made our job so much harder. And then you mentioned social media. Like, there's so much crap out there, but a small percentage of that crap might have some truth behind it. So what we found ourselves doing at the Post was like chasing down these rumors that some random person posted on social media, because 1 out of 100 times it was accurate. So you got to chase down the other 99. So all of those different elements made my job, frankly, less enjoyable.
Yeah, this is silly, but you'll get it and appreciate it. And I'm sure it happened to you over the years, or maybe even still does, where I'll have a friend or friends that say, hey, should I take Bobby Witt Jr. with the second pick? And I'm like, one, that I don't know. But two, there's nothing I can tell you that isn't already out there.
Yeah.
It's all there. I've got no advantage. I can tell you if he's a good guy or not. I can tell you some things he's working on, but it's all out there right now. Okay. Second question, as we round the bases, you and I have some things in common. One of them is not our alma maters. I'll just readily admit that as someone that went to Wisconsin, I'm incapable of liking your alma mater of Michigan. No hatred, but I have the same lack of love for Ohio State. So, it basically goes like this: when Michigan and Ohio State play in football, I hope it ends in a tie. I know that's not possible, or that maybe it's postponed due to weather, because I don't want to have to root for either one of those teams. You get it. It's good to be it's good to come from a great school like Michigan. That was just my way of addressing your alma mater and our differences. And you guys have had quite a bit more success than we have. But here's what we have in common.
Yes.
I was reading that you called yourself a lousy baseball player who committed 8 years of Little League but wasn't good enough to play in high school. Check. That was me.
Nice.
As well. Has been quoted as saying he would rather repeatedly jam an ice pick into his eyeball than to think about the home run derby, which he calls an awful event. I have not thought about jamming an ice pick in my eye, but I, to this day, don't. I watch it, but I don't really. I find it boring. Let's talk about that. It's very, people love that stuff, right? But I don't know. I just don't really get it.
Well, it's funny, Joe. I think it's actually gotten much better ever since they added the clock, which was probably 10 years ago now at this point. But at least now there's some timeliness to obviously they still have a 3-hour slot to fill. But I remember when they added the clock, I was so grateful. But I remember, prior to that, I think one time I called it one step above a cow milking contest. And
that's about right.
Someone at Major League Baseball, off the record, commended me. Like, that was a great line. And you're right. Because Bud Selig, who I love, I had a great personal relationship, but he admitted, my wife gets pretty bored watching that Derby, So, and he was the commissioner. So, pretty dreadful stuff. But I do think it's gotten less bad.
It has gotten better, and what they've done well with it, and the All-Star game for that matter, is more player access, miking guys up, bringing people on the inside. And so it becomes more of a showcase of personalities. That part certainly has been good. Bud Selig, by the way, you know what his alma mater is?
Wisconsin, baby.
He's Wisconsin through and through.
Yeah.
All right, third question as we round the bases. Let's talk a little bit more about being an adjunct professor now. And I think that when I found out you're doing that, I thought, oh, well, he's just going to go out there and he's going to be a journalism professor. No, social science, humanities, communication, certainly that applies too. And no experience of doing this either. I just get the sense that you are loving every minute of this. What do you love about it? How scary was that?
Yeah, it was scary at the beginning, Joel, because I admitted this to the Endicott people. Said, I don't know how to teach. You said, I think I have good enough people skills that I can relate to the students and help them. I think I know the material, and I think I have some connections that will help. So the first semester I taught up at Endicott, it was sports journalism. And, this is right in the heart of New England. So week 1, I introduced myself. Week 2, I brought in as my guest speaker, Dan Shaughnessy. So, talk about instant credibility with the audio. He zoomed in, but, everyone was saying, oh, my God, Mr. Shaughnessy, my grandfather reads you, and my grandfather wants me to ask you this, So from that point on, they kind of saw that, okay, this guy, at the least he knows some people. And then, he knows some stuff. And now I'm on my 6th semester, Joel, and I think I've learned how to teach. I think I've gotten much better at actually teaching. And the nice thing about the small college is they have had me teach 4 different classes. So it's not just sports journalism. So it was initially sports journalism, but then a class called Contemporary Issues in Journalism, then a class called feature writing, and then a class called multimedia journalism. And this semester I'm back to feature writing, my second go around there. And we're actually having the students write stories that are being published by small publications in Massachusetts.
Wow.
So it's pretty great.
Super cool.
I love connecting with the students. I love being part, like I said, I love being part of the New York Post team. I love being part of the Endicott College team, the other professors and just all the, the IT people, like you said, right? Like with the elevator operator and the security people, like you spend enough time in a place, you get to know everyone. So just the whole, everyone on this college, I just love being part of that team.
Yeah. Well said. All right. Last question, my walk-off. Is there one piece from your previous life that you miss? I know you don't miss much of it. That's not a knock on the profession or the sport. You gave yourself some freedom that you didn't have for a lot of years. And if anyone that's listening understands that, good. If you don't, I don't know. I do. I get every bit of it. I'm not ready to go there, but I have so much appreciation for what you did, because it's not easy to do when you have your dream job and you're living it. I know it's not the deadlines. I don't think it's the bad press box coffee. What do you miss?
Joel, this might have me committed. This is a little nutty, but with the travel, like when there was travel adversity, like I reveled in solving it. Okay, I remember here's one that comes to mind. I was covering a Mets series in Pittsburgh, and I'm in my car service in Manhattan, and I get an alert on my Delta app, your flight has been canceled. And I'm like, oh boy. So I tell the car service person, stop, just pull over here, pull over to the, get out of traffic. I need to figure this out. So I called my travel agent, and what's going on? Yeah, nothing out of LaGuardia, nothing out of JFK, nothing out of Newark to Pittsburgh. And so how about Philadelphia? Yeah, there's a noon flight from Philadelphia to Pittsburgh. All right, it's 9 a.m. right now. I can make it to Philly in time. I tell the car service person, drive me to Philadelphia airport. Okay, get to Pittsburgh in time. And I remember the New York Times guy that day is like, yeah, my flight got canceled at LaGuardia. So I drove. I was like, you drove? What a mistake. You should have gone to Philly like me. So that was for me, I thought I was pretty good at it, like solving travel crises and like beating the competition at that. Like I would get more fired about that sometimes than I would about like breaking a trade story.
Yeah, somehow strangely that makes sense to me, and because you remember those moments, you just do that, and they're not moments you'll ever have again, for better and worse. I mean, we finished a game in 2013, a getaway day in St. Louis, rain in the ninth inning, a change in rules about reverting back to the previous inning that the umpires didn't quite know. They hadn't gotten the memo. The minor league guys knew it, the big leaguers hadn't, and Joe West was not going to allow a game to end inappropriately. The Cardinals were stalling until they realized that they needed to hurry up, and or vice versa. And we had to go to Texas. That game, by the way, George Brett became the interim hitting coach during that series. Right. So this was going to be his first time traveling with us in, decades, I guess. And we finished at 3:14 in the morning, arrived at Texas something like 6:30 in the morning. I had scheduled to do a radio interview close to 10, like the last shift, so I could sleep and then finish up with their morning show back in Kansas City. I texted him, call me in a half hour because I'm going to bed soon. Fell asleep doing the radio interview at 7:15 in my bed, and then, got up later that day and did another baseball game. And so those aren't fun moments, but they're memorable moments, and you'll just never get those back. So I appreciate where you're going from that. More importantly, and it's so good to see you, I want to encourage everybody to check out this book, and especially if you have kids that are of the age to read this, or read it with them. And you don't have to be a kid either, but check out the book, 101 Lessons from the Dugout. So perfect for this time of year as baseball's ramping back up and getting going as well. Ken, congratulations on everything, the previous career, the current career, and the book. And so glad to be able to catch up with you.
It's great to see you, Joel. If it's okay, I'll just mention the book can be purchased at Amazon. The publisher is Bloomsbury. It's on their website, and then hopefully at a bookstore near you. But I'm very, very grateful to you for catching up today and giving me the time.
Everybody check it out. It is an important one. And baseball players, softball players, 101 Lessons from the Dugout, what baseball and softball can teach us about the game of life. Check it out on Amazon. Ken, thanks again.
Thank you, Joel.
Goldberg. It's around the bases. Everybody knows Joe Goldberg.